Hello, everybody. Welcome to a breaking news special event here on Narrative TV. It's good to be with you tonight as we cover a whole lot of breaking news with Joe Dempsey. Hi, Joe. How are you?
Hi, Zev. Good to see you.
And our special guest tonight, Kimberley Johnson of the Started Up podcast. How are you, Kimberley? Good to see you again.
Good to see you. Thank you. I'm good.
Boy, we've had a busy news afternoon. It really has been kind of something. I've been struggling to get all these live feeds going and everything, but we thought we'll just talk it through rather than try to find all these videotapes. Right? It's so much easier than that. In reality, we've had some significant breaking news just in the last few minutes. The biggest news, I suppose, that happened in relation to the press conference that Joe Biden had revolves around Ukraine and ostensibly allowing Putin to allow some sort of incursion into Ukraine. We'll clarify what he said in just a few minutes. But the other big news that just broke in the recent past involved the Supreme Court. And I think, Joe, you have a good understanding of what the Supreme Court is saying about the January 6th committee.
I'm sorry to say, Zev, I actually hadn't seen that. I was doing some
Okay.
other things.
I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
apologize.
I'll tell everyone then what is happening. So
Please,
basically, the
I'm
Supreme
waiting.
Court will not block the National Archives from turning over the Trump documents to the 1/6 committee. So this is a significant event because we've all been waiting for these documents to arrive today. And in fact, they should be arriving now at any time because there's really no reason why they should be held back any further. These are significant documents that involve Donald Trump's activities on January the 6th. Who he was talking to, what he was doing throughout the day, all that critical information. We'll now have that information direct from his documents. So that is coming out tonight. That is not going to make Donald Trump a very happy man tonight. I don't think so. And it's
No.
not. He's not had a lot of good news in the last 24 hours. The Letitia James press release, which detailed in great detail, and we will go through it tonight, all the things that the Donald Trump organization did in order to fudge the numbers, to dodge taxes, and who it involves. Of course, it involves Donald Trump Jr. and Ivanka. That's all coming out as well, and we'll go into it in great detail coming up. And of course, we're waiting for a big vote in the Senate tonight regarding voters' rights. And I know, Joe, you have something on that.
Yes, there. It looks like Chuck Schumer just took to the floor about 6:30 or so and said that about 8 o'clock is when they're going to have the final vote tonight.
Oh, 8 o'clock. So this is the vote. Just to remind everybody, this is a vote that will allow for the talking filibuster. Really, that's all it does. And what the talking filibuster does is it allows there to be a filibuster, which basically people just have natural debate, normal debate for. And then once the debate has run out, which means every senator has spoken once or twice, once it's run out, then they can actually vote. If I'm not mistaken, that's what's going to happen. Is that correct?
Yes. So everybody's having their say. I was in that sort of hearing all day today, so that's kind of where I was. But these guys are, they're doing something that they haven't really done. I think what we need to sort of point out is that over the last 6 years or however long Mitch McConnell's been the majority leader when he had that post, he was protecting the Republicans for not ever having to go on record with anything that we really needed to address. So you could sit in your office and say, no, I don't really support that bill. That became the filibuster. And no one really knew who said, I don't want to do it. And nobody really understood the reasons why they didn't want to do it.
Correct.
So this talking filibuster is going to be, really important if they can get this done, because what we saw today, or what we're seeing tonight as well, you can see people actually making their case to the public as to why they're not supporting voting rights, which is ridiculous. A lot of things that Mitch McConnell was talking about. I watched Mitch McConnell first thing, right after Chuck Schumer spoke this morning, and he's just gaslighting the nation. It's ridiculous what he was saying. We can talk more about that later if you want to, but it is important to understand this is something the Senate hasn't been doing for years. And it's amazing to watch because people are now able to engage, and if from a public perspective, understand who the representatives are and what it is that they're representing, and then evaluate whether or not that's truly representative of how they feel. And
Right,
that's
which is
not
so unique. It almost seems strange in the setting we're in, right? Because it's so unusual. But this is how representative government is meant to work, isn't it, Kimberly? I mean, this is the way democracy works.
Yes, and it's the way it's supposed to work.
Yeah.
And, I think that this is our pretty much only hope here. If we can't get this with the talking filibuster, I don't know I don't even want to think about what's going to happen if that's the case. But yeah, I think, and it's extremely important that we do pass this because I know you're going to get into the Letitia James and all that, but there is this is slightly different, but there's a lot of chatter online about Merrick Garland and the importance of indictments before the midterms. People are putting all this emphasis on, unless big names in Trumpco are indicted, that people are going to feel beaten down and not show up to vote in November, which I disagree with, because I don't think Merrick Garland has that power. I don't necessarily think an indictment is going to mean anything specific before the elections, but I just want to emphasize that even if we do see an indictment, if we don't pass voting rights and we don't save democracy, none of that will matter, because if the Republicans take over, they'll just pardon everybody and there will be no justice.
Right.
Yeah. It's interesting. I have to say that I think Joe Biden is a singularly impressive politician, but also one of the most remarkable presidents America has ever had. And you can't look at the incredible events of the last year and how much he's been able to do and look at it through the jaundiced eyes of Fox News or Newsmax or Mitch McConnell or any of the other Republicans. Because let's not forget that Donald Trump ended his term leaving America in a total mess. In a total chaotic mess. There was nothing to be said for America at that time. We were riddled with COVID. People were dying left, right, and center. There was no vaccination program. The economy was a mess. He had no plan, none at all. And it was handed over to Joe Biden with very little cooperation. He was hiding details of what his administration had done or hadn't done in many cases. He was restricting access to the Pentagon. He was restricting access to important national security files. And then on top of that, the guy tries to attempt a coup on the way out the door. So Biden has become such an important figure. And the thing is, he's super conciliatory and he doesn't criticize people. And he's just working 24 hours a day, probably, trying to fix the mess that the GOP and the Donald Trump administration left behind. And people are criticizing this man for doing the most phenomenal job. Some people standing up in the middle of this press conference accusing him of not having, some sort of, now I'm losing mine, but of not being coherent or not being able to have cognitive abilities. I mean, of course he has cognitive abilities. He's running the superpower that's running the world. Of course he has them. He's fixing every single problem we've ever had, and he's fixing it all at the same time. We've never had a health crisis like this happen on top of an economic crisis like this, happening on top of a trade crisis like this, happening on top of a supply chain crisis like this. And he is just walking through this without any difficulty. Without any difficulty. He's having some hiccups, but generally speaking, for him to have passed these singular achievements like the infrastructure bill, which is stunning already. I mean, just that on its own is a stunning achievement. And for there to be an incredible amount of job growth in the country, a GDP that's flourishing, you've got a situation that, America is really bouncing back from one hell of a hole that we were in, and people dare criticize him. I find that just astonishing to me. I don't know if I need to pick it up there.
Yeah, well, I'd like to just point out, and this is obvious.
Go ahead, Kimberly.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Kimberly.
I just wanted to say, and this is obvious, that Joe Biden has a stutter. And so he's not a young man. That doesn't, because he's not young, doesn't mean that he has lost his cognitive abilities, but it's just like when people get older, they tend to talk a little bit differently. And then on top of it, he's got a stutter. And so they use that to point out that, this ridiculous notion of him having cognitive issues, and he doesn't. When he talked, the last time, that angry speech that he gave last week, the dude you could tell, he's very sharp. He knows what he's talking about. And I would argue that actually, if any president that, at least in my time, had cognitive issues, it would be Reagan and Trump.
Well, especially, yeah, exactly. Trump was drunk all the time. Remember that, everybody? Remember he was high all the time? We all knew that. It wasn't a surprise to anybody.
Adderall.
And whatever it was on, some people said it was Adderall. Some people said it was alcohol. Who knows what it was? Maybe it was both. But, he wasn't there a lot of the time. We all know that because he used to tweet in the middle of the night crazy stuff at world leaders, almost sparking world wars. This guy was not sane. And the fact that the Republican Party has this amnesia about what they did, never mind what, the fact that the people's approval ratings of Joe Biden is so low is stunning, because They're
Mm-hmm.
missing the plot. 4 more
Mm-hmm.
years of Donald Trump. Can you imagine what that would have looked like?
No.
Can you imagine one
No.
year after, 1 year now into a second administration of Donald
No.
Trump would have been a disaster of mammoth
Mm-hmm.
proportions. And people need to have to understand, I don't know what's wrong with the American memories, but I mean, we need to start remembering things, because if we don't remember things, we're just going to keep repeating them endlessly. And we're in a situation now where people are actually contemplating, returning the Republican Party back into some sort of power, where they should be,
Yeah.
completely abolished. I mean, there's no reason for the
Mm-hmm.
Republican Party to even be in existence today. They have no, as Biden kept saying repeatedly today, what does Mitch McConnell stand for? What does the Republican Party stand for? Nothing,
Mm-hmm.
nothing
Right.
except being anti-Joe Biden, which is really all they seem to care about. Is making sure that the liberals are owned. Well, guess what? That's
Mm-hmm.
half your country that's being owned too, and half your
Yes.
country that's not being effective, and half your country that's losing. So guess who's losing? All of you are losing as well.
Mm-hmm.
It's tiring, but it's just the reality of it. Sorry, Joe, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, just I think to your earlier point, Biden is going to be one of the most consequential presidents in the history of this nation, just
Mm,
given where we are right now.
yeah.
He's either going to be the last president of a democracy, or he'll be the president who saved a democracy. So
Mm-hmm.
one of those two things is going to happen at this point. That's just where we are.
That
The
is a very good point.
intransigence of the Republicans, they're just simply not willing to participate. I mean, you say that the Republicans have amnesia. I don't know that it's amnesia. I think it's continuing their own narrative.
Mm,
They were saying that the guy who Captain Covfefe was a genius and a
mm,
super genius, and
Mm-hmm.
you
mm,
know now they build up their guy and tear down the one who's there for all Americans, right? That's basically what he's saying. And the other thing that I took away from a lot of the speeches that were coming out of the Republican side this afternoon were, you're not an American unless you're a Republican, and that's just wrong.
Mm-hmm.
It's just wrong.
Yeah.
absolutely. I think what you're saying there about the ecosystem is so true. I think the problem with America is the news networks. You look at Fox News, which is, you know, borderline fiction. I mean, sort of
No,
validated
it is.
sometimes,
It's
but
straight up lies.
it's
It's
like it's not
propaganda and
true.
lies.
It's not true.
Yeah.
9 times out of 10, you turn there, you think, well, that's really interesting. I mean, but it's not. It's a take on the news, but it's certainly not the news. It's not a factual
Right.
take on the news. Then it goes from there. It gets much worse. You got Newsmax right next to it, which is,
Oh, yeah.
pretty cuckoo, like pretty out there.
Mm-hmm.
OAN, which is now being taken off DirecTV, which is owned by the Moonies, and is even more insane. I mean, is the people, they actually run the conspiracy theories that they then cover. That's how where we've gotten to in the American system.
Yeah.
And frankly, CNN is no better than
No
Fox,
better.
because they just start gaslighting everybody every day. I mean, that sort of seems to be their mission, is to gaslight the entire country. So you're left with the MSNBC to sort of be, sort of responsible, but it's also, a certain point of view. There is no news in this country that is actually the news. Everyone's got a pointed opinion, and what you're getting is that nobody is actually is seeing the real truth. The truth is things are going really well. The reality of it is we are kicking COVID. We are kicking it because Omicron is going to give us a large amount of herd immunity, even if it's not total. But the reality of it is we've got the pill that's coming along that's going to make it much easier to treat the COVID that we do have. It doesn't necessarily go away, but it's going to be a much easier thing to deal with. It's, China, by the way, which used to have no COVID, by the way, miraculously. Because how is it possible that a country like
Mm-hmm.
China, which originated COVID, how is it possible that they have no COVID there? Well, they haven't up until now, except for Omicron. Now Omicron is causing a problem for them because they weren't really anticipating it, and it spreads so
Mm-hmm.
wildly, and their vaccines don't really work for it. So just a few weeks ahead of the Olympics, China's the one having a problem. So that'll be interesting to see what happens there. I mean, that's going to be a fascinating
Yeah.
turn of events. But my point is, we're kicking COVID. That's going to be 95% of schools are open now still, according to Joe Biden. That's pretty impressive. 95% of schools to be open in the middle of a pandemic. That means we've obviously done a lot there. People are obviously taking their measures very seriously where they can, where it's happening in the right areas, and the economy is firing on all cylinders. The problem is we've got a bit of inflation, sure. The other problem is we may have a war, sure. It's a challenge. But generally speaking, boy, we are so much better off than we were a year ago.
Well, that seems to be the case. We have a Republican administration in for X amount of time, 1 or 2 terms, and the economy goes to crap and everything goes to crap. And then the Democrats have to come and fix this. And, I posted on Twitter a while back something about how we need to get the Voting Rights Acts passed, because this election, it's just like you were saying, this could be the end of democracy. And somebody said, oh, no, the Republicans will win, and then they're going to mess everything up, and then the Democrats will win. And it's like, no, not this time. It's not going to work that way. Yeah. The Republicans are going to do what they've been accusing the Democrats of doing for at least 6 years now, which is rigging the elections. They are going to rig the elections, and we're going to see Russia-style elections where they're not really election, and it's going to be 90% for the fascist. And so, it drives me nuts, because people, going back to your point, people aren't paying attention to what's going on. It goes to that movie, Don't Look Up. I think we talked about it. I don't even remember if we talked about it, but the idea of the movie Don't Look Up is just not recognizing what's happening. And I think I posted the other night something about how this is not a debate between Republicans and Democrats. This is literally a debate between reality versus people who are just not even in reality. People who deny reality, science deniers, and what's in front of your face deniers, and whatever it is that the Republicans are accusing the Democrats of doing, that's what the Republicans are doing. And then that's the argument that they say back to us. And it's maddening, and it's gaslighting. And I wish American people would wake up to it. Unfortunately, because we have Newsmax and OAN and these terrible, even CNN, Jeff Zucker is friends with Donald Trump.
Yeah, of course.
We no longer, thank you, Ronald Reagan, have the fairness doctrine, and we do have nightly news. But how many people are out there watching, NBC or ABC nightly news? And that's the closest thing you're going to get to straight news with no opinion.
Well, especially because these news entities are owned by specific corporations, and most of these specific corporations have specific agendas, and they are not going to allow proper coverage of what's really going on. We saw it with Trump Russia. We saw that there was no real coverage of what really happened with Trump Russia. There's very little and very limited coverage of what happened on Jan 6. It's only because of outlets like this where we're pushing the boundaries and pushing every time we're on the air, further investigations onto Jan 6, that even MSNBC has picked up that mantle. But there's a lot that needs to be done in terms of making sure that we have a news system which is actually taking the news seriously and is not just spouting the opinions of their corporate headquarters, which I've been there. I mean, I know this is exactly what happens. I mean, they'll tell you what you can and can't report. And as a journalist, that's not a place I can be. But, a lot of people will take the $1 million salaries to be on, the CNN morning show and do the news the way Jeff Zucker wants them to do the news. I mean, I can't live with that, but some people can, and a lot of people do. But those people are not giving America a real picture of what's going on. I saw every single person standing there today at that press conference, and I was blown away by the negativity of the questions. Not maybe one person sort of gave a sort of positive question. Everybody else in that White House press call stood up, and their idea of a good question was to attack the president of the United States for something he had done, which he hadn't even done. It wasn't factually based. It was just sort of an opinion that someone gave them in their newsroom, which they then had to come into the White House press room there and actually ask the president of the United States an unfounded, unfactual question. And this is what it was like for like an hour and almost 2 hours. There's nonsensical accusations against the president of the United States, which in any other country would get you fired from your state-run news organization, frankly. Now, it's fine that we don't do that. We shouldn't do that. But on the other hand, people should at least consider that they're asking, this is only the second press conference of the entire administration, and they're not even asking him legitimate questions. They're just trying to play gotcha with him, which doesn't make you a good journalist. It just makes you one of them, just another typical right-wing, spokesperson or front person.
Well, again, the whole day today seemed to be just fishing for sound bites that you could play to an audience and carve them up however you want to. Yeah. I mean, one of the questions that they asked Biden was, I think one of the first questions was, why isn't the country more united after a year? Well, you've got half the Senate who's not interested You've got half
Yeah.
the Senate who doesn't want to participate.
Yeah.
Like I said, they're not interested in governing. They're not interested in reconciliation. They're not interested in bipartisanship. They keep saying we want bipartisanship. Well, then do something about it. Right? If you
Yeah.
want bipartisanship, come across the aisle, come across and actually have some conversations that are meaningful and can move things forward. It's
Hmm.
ridiculous.
They don't want it, though.
Senators. They don't want it. You've got senators. I think it's. I want to say it's in Montana, I believe. I'm not sure where Senator Tester is. I think he's Montana. But you've got these states where you've got one Republican and one Democratic senator, and they are not on the same page. Even what's going on within their own state. How is that possible?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, I got to say, one thing that really bugs me about and why I think this process tonight in the Senate is going to be hopeful. I cannot believe that these Republicans are getting away with accusing, both sides are really accusing Manchin and Sinema of being the reason we can't pass this voters' rights bill. There are 50 Republicans in that Senate who are quite capable of voting for this voters' rights bill if they really support it. They are choosing not to support it in order to create a domestic fight inside the Democratic Party. But truthfully,
you've got senators who are leaving. You've got senators that don't even need to worry about whether or not they're going to be primaried or whether or not they're going to lose their next election because they're retiring. And even they won't stand up. You're telling me that Pat Toomey can't stand up in Pennsylvania?
I mean, he should be able to. There's no reason. And you'd think he would. What about Murkowski? I mean, I can't believe that she's not doing it. She's basically an independent. Why is she not voting for this? There's so many obvious questions around why the Republicans are not supporting the voters' rights bill that it clearly shows us that they are just pro-suppression, that they're not interested in democracy, that they're interested in rigging the elections yet again. We've seen last night, we had Sherry Jacobus on the show where she was detailing, legitimate, real evidence of what happened in 2016 about how they rigged the vote in 2016 for Donald Trump to win by releasing the exit polling data to him. So if that happened in 2016, and we know in 2020 they weren't happy with the election results, they almost threw a coup. What's going to happen in 22 and 24? Because it's not going to get better. I mean, we're heading down a direction which is not good, and this party is not interested in democracy. It's not interested in helping people vote. It's not interested in that. It's interested in getting power and rigging the elections, which is what they intend to do going forward.
We need to start talking about this as a fascist takeover, because that's what this is. We are in the midst of a fascist takeover. They are doing this at the local level. They're doing it at the state level, because what they're going to be able to point to is that they are actually following the laws. Well, the laws themselves are corrupt. The laws themselves are not democratically installed. They're not really what the people are looking for. It's what the fascists are looking for, and what they're setting up so that they can point to later to say, we followed the laws.
Listen, apartheid was also based on rules and laws, but they were not, ethically sound or morally sound, and they ended up causing a lot of pain and hurt. Sorry, Kimberley, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say regarding the Manchin and Sinema argument, and there's actually a few more Democrats that are we don't hear about them as much. Manchin and Sinema are getting all the attention, and I can't name off the ones, but there are a few Democrats that are afraid to mess with the filibuster or abolish it. But I think that the reason why everybody focuses it's like Joe just said, this is a fascist takeover. They're attempting a fascist takeover, and so people are not even considering Republicans. I mean, Lisa Murkowski, I agree with you. I think that she should step up, but then we don't know. Every time somebody goes against Trump in the Republican Party, they experience some kind of trouble, whether it's death threats to their family. So this is, partially it's an autocracy, in that we have some people legislating as if it were one, and then we have this strong man who is the leader of the Republican Party at this point, and he is an autocrat, and he holds no office, but he holds power over the party, and he is making them. There could be an argument made that the Republican Party wants to kind of like let go of him, but they're stuck with him.
They're not trying to get rid of him. They're not.
Well, I think some don't.
They love the checks.
But well, you know what? I don't. I think they love what he gives them, but they
Mm,
don't like him, and they're afraid of him. I mean, I think we saw Nikki Haley last year talking about having cognitive tests for presidents,
mm,
and then taxes. Show your taxes. It's my opinion that the reason she said that is because cognitive she could throw in there because everybody's saying it about Biden. So it's like,
mm,
okay, that gives her cover to throw cognitive, but really it's for Donald Trump because
mm.
he's an idiot and he's a savvy guy and he knows what he's doing. But then the tax thing, Joe Biden already offered his taxes up. Donald Trump refused to do it. And I think that the Republicans would be much happier at this point to get rid of Trump and go in their own fascist direction. He opened the gates for them. But Joe Walsh, who is a Republican, or he's an independent now, says tons of people in the Republican Party hate Donald Trump, but they won't say it out loud because they're too afraid.
Well, the
There's
problem
five.
is that you got DeSantis in the wings over there,
Yes.
who's far
Yeah.
more scary, in my
He's
opinion,
worse.
because
Yeah.
he is smart enough to execute fascism without getting
Yes.
too caught up in the weeds and getting lost into the way that Donald Trump did. But his proposal yesterday to cut the number of congressional districts that have black majorities in half in Florida
Right.
is straight up apartheid. I mean, there's no other way to
Mhm.
describe it.
Mhm.
And so, you're going to take away rights of black people to vote in the 2022. Is that what you're really going to do in America? That is what the Republican Party is attempting to do. Let's get to the
Yes.
people are commenting online. Let's get their comments in. It's at narrative.org/TV, narrative.org/TV. When I was a kid, I thought generally that R&Ds wanted the same thing for people, but the methods to get there were different. That is not the case now. Republicans don't care about the average person. That it could not be any truer than it is right now.
Yeah,
Any of you want to sound
absolutely.
off on that? That's really interesting. Any comments on that?
Go ahead, Joe.
Zero. They're at a zero-sum game at this point, right? They just want to
Mm-hmm.
win at any cost because it's what they want. They want the power and they want the money, and that's all they want. They want to. They don't
Yeah.
want to govern. They want to rule.
David says, if
Yes.
DeSantis becomes POTUS, I'm going underground. There may be good reason for a lot of us to go underground. It's just not, it's
Yeah.
kind of scary when you think about it. It's just we're
It is
seeing the
very.
end of the end of a very proud democracy and the end of a country if these people are allowed to continue their illogical and
Mhm.
immoral rule. Matt Fausta says the only solution is a big fat indictment of Trump and a big news story of his myriad crimes. I
So
agree.
I don't.
he's a
I
criminal.
don't.
He's a
Mm,
criminal. We talked about whether he's cognitively declining. The man's a criminal. I mean,
mm,
the New York Attorney General is investigating. The Fulton County DA is investigating. And he's being investigated by the Manhattan DA for both. There's civil and there's criminal cases that are against
Mm-hmm.
him at this point. And I think we talk about it later. But Letitia James said in her document that it's pretty common for civil and criminal cases to move in
Mm-hmm.
parallel. So the
mm.
fact that she even said that tells us there's a criminal case.
There is a criminal
There
case,
is a criminal case.
and it's I think it's if there's a reason Donald Trump is not sleeping well tonight, it's because of Letitia James. I mean, there's just a lot of news going on there, and I want to get into that story as well. But let me just take a couple more comments.
Well, I'd like to just say
yeah,
about the comment
yeah, go
about
ahead.
I think we will see indictments, but I don't think that is going to, as I said earlier, I don't think it's going to answer all the questions or be the savior for 2022. I think
Mhm.
that mainly we need to get these voting right bills passed, and then we need enough people to get to the polls, because historically speaking, and unfortunately, I do think that this 2022, I think we're going to expect a bigger turnout than we saw in, say, 2014, but
Mhm.
I don't know if it will be quite as big as 2018. And those indictments, and I'm not going to argue that they're necessary, I absolutely believe they're necessary, but I don't think they're as important as people think they are in specifically for the 2022 elections, because we pass these voting rights, we could save democracy, and that big fat indictment might come in 23.
Mhm.
So I don't want to just put this time frame on it
Yeah.
to say that if it doesn't happen this year, it's never going to happen. President Biden's going to be there until 2024. So indictments could also come in 2024, and I don't care if I have to wait an extra year for it. I want democracy to be preserved more than anything.
And at this
Absolutely.
point, we have to look back to our recent past, because we're not going to find a savior. There's nobody coming in on a white horse that's going to save
Exactly.
us. Mueller didn't save us. The Senate
Yes.
Intelligence Report Volume 5 didn't save us. Nobody's going to save us but us. We
Mm.
have to vote. It's that simple. If we
Yes.
grow the majority in the Senate because
Yes.
we went and we voted, we are the people
Mm-hmm.
who are
Mhm.
going to preserve democracy. It is
Yes.
only going to be up to us. If tonight fails and we don't get a talking filibuster, and then they don't pass voting rights, the the fact is they're leaving it again up to us. They're abdicating that
Mm-hmm.
responsibility back to the people, and the people are going to have to pick up that mantle, and we are going to have to vote like we have never voted before.
Yeah, but we shouldn't have
Mm-hmm.
to do that, to
Yeah.
your point. I mean, the
Right.
reality of it is we should be protecting people's
No.
rights to vote. I still
That's right.
believe, and I don't care how many strategists want to tell me otherwise, that the Republicans are going to win in November. I don't believe that they will win the House in November. I just can't believe it because
No.
it just defies logic, in my opinion, even though I've seen the numbers, I've seen the districts. I don't think
Right. I just
gerrymandering
don't
is
even
as
want to hear
bad.
about the poll numbers.
Yeah,
No.
I don't believe it. Yeah,
Right.
exactly. Poll numbers are very wrong these days. By the way, some other things that Joe Biden said today he said about COVID, the job is not yet done. I thought that was a good positioning. In terms of inflation, he said the US economy can beat inflation, but it needs to be more productive, which is a good point. And he's introduced lots of measures to make it more productive. In terms of Build Back Better, he says he's going to prioritize some of those, especially the energy and climate change pieces, and get those passed first up. It doesn't look like child care credits are going to get passed. The supply chain, he says we have to become self-reliant, and he's doing that particularly on computer chips. He says the solution to fixing inflation, for example, in cars, which is a third of our increases in terms of inflation, is getting computer chips. And the computer chip supply chain is being disrupted because of COVID. He says we're going to make computer chips at home and become self-reliant. That's a good strategy there. And on Russia, Ukraine, yes, they're the worst sanctions he's ever faced if Putin invades Ukraine. But he did leave the door open for a little incursion. I don't know what that means. I suspect it could mean the Russian parts of Ukraine, like the Donbass, but we'll see how far that goes. And he did say that he brought gas prices down with China and India and all those others in the last few weeks. He was able to bring gas prices down. And I believe he did. They were 15 cents lower, I think, than they were when he first started that initiative, when prices started to climb. So if you haven't seen the press conference, I thought it was brilliantly done. And Joe Biden is not exactly lightning on TV or anywhere else. He's not the world's greatest speaker. It's okay. We don't need a president that's the
Right.
greatest
Right.
speaker. It's fine if
Right.
he is. It's awesome, if he could. But if that's his weak point, that's fine. As long as he governs well and produces what the American people need, that's perfectly okay. Let's listen to what Letitia James is doing. Let's take a look at what Letitia James is doing, because this woman is out for the Trumps. I mean, she really, really is, and it's and she's not going after just Donald Trump Senior. She's going after Junior, and she's going after Ivanka, which personally I couldn't be happier about.
I know.
There's Letitia James on the right. I mean, God bless this woman for everything she's putting in here. And there's some irony, I guess, in the fact that a black woman prosecutor is going to be taking down Donald Trump. I don't mind that irony.
Oh, it's so delicious.
At all. So I'm going to have a little bit of glee while I think about that. Now, basically what she's saying is that the Trumps have been kind of habitually overinflating the value of their properties. That might seem to you like, so what? We all kind of overrate, say our properties are worth more or whatever. Not so Donald Trump. I mean, he really overinflates the prices that he thinks he's going to get or the value of their properties. And then he borrows against that, you see, to buy other things. And that's how he becomes a billionaire, by being basically a large borrower based on inflated assets. That's not legal. It's not. You can't do that, Mr. Trump, nor can you declare that to the IRS, because guess what? They're going to say that you're not paying your taxes. And if you remember, it's not the first time a mobster has gone down for not paying his taxes.
Yep.
So
Right.
it's one way to get at someone, that's for sure. So let me run through some of the things here that Letitia's pointed out in her very long and interesting press release, but also her full-on, it's not an indictment because it isn't an official indictment. It's just a request for them to help her provide evidence and testimony on these things. But take the Seven Springs Golf Course, for example, which was bought in 1985, and then in 2004 was worth $80 million. But because he said he was going to build luxury homes there to be valued at 161 million, but never did actually build the luxury homes there for 161 million, he declared in 2007 that the property was worth 200 million. And then in 2012, 291 million. And then in 2016, as he was becoming president, he realizes, I better put that down to 54 million, which is probably closer to the actual cost, because he knew he was going to get audited. I mean, this guy has been inflating the value of this property by 200 million or so. That is a significant amount of money. And he can't do that because, of course, you're paying taxes on these things. And he's estimated when he paid taxes, he's estimating them at a far lower value. Then he's in 2012, he bought the Trump Tower triplex, which is the place he lives in at the top floor of the Trump Tower, if he still has it. I don't think he does. He originally valued it at 127 million, which is obviously ridiculous. But then in 2015, he values it at 327 million. Also in 2016, 327 million. But that's because he estimated that the actual square foot of the place, or this footage of the place, was 30,000 square feet instead of 10,000 square feet. His own CFO says, yes, they overstated the amount by give or take $200 million. So just two instances there where they've done $400 million of swindling. And Weisselberg is out there obviously saying, yeah, that's what they did. It was just $200 million, $200 million.
Wow.
Now, that's all fine. So he's overestimating the value of his property. But then he goes to the banks. He goes to Deutsche Bank and he says, hey, listen, I'm worth this much money because look at all my assets. So let me borrow against that. And then let me buy something else. And this is the thing he does endlessly and endlessly. And clearly, he's been caught. I mean, there's no doubt about it that Letitia James is pointing out in this very detailed document, she has the goods. Weisselberg is obviously singing. So, it doesn't look good for Donald Trump.
That's funny because I heard Weisselberg wasn't going to sing, but maybe he is. And regardless, either way, I think I'm hoping what happens, and I said this on the Daily Beans, which I think is going to come out tomorrow. But, we've been conditioned to be disappointed, even though we have been, we again, in 2018, we saw Democratic wins. Joe Biden won in 2020. So we have had some wins along the way. But ever since 2015, there's been so many crushing disappointments, so many things to make us feel hopeless. And as we look at the Republican Party right now, obviously, they're terrifying. But I think that this particular, between the two, the criminal and the civil suits against these Trumps, I think we're going to see real action on them this year. And I think what that's going to do, because if we were to get like a 1-6 or even an obstruction indictment, I think it would make our side, and when I say our side, I don't just mean Democrats, I mean sane Americans who want democracy. Yeah. I think it will make our side feel like we've got some power, and it will go a very long way. It will help us, lift us to the polls. It will lift our spirits. It will make us feel like, okay, we're actually seeing some justice. And, I think we're absolutely going to see something coming out of New York. There's a decent, I think, possibility that something maybe with the Georgia lawsuit. Yeah. I don't know about that. With Letitia James, we know that she's serious and she does not mess around. So I do think it's going to give us hope.
Now, she's the attorney general. She does civil lawsuits in New York, but she's working with a DA who's new. Cyrus Vance, he's no longer there. And I forget the new guy who's there now, Alan something or other. I can't remember. But the new guy, they're working together to do this. And, but he was elected primarily to get Trump. So was she, frankly.
Right.
So, I think it's not looking good for them in New York. And I think that the one reason that they've been escaping prosecution in the federal courts is because of him being a confidential informant. And I've said this repeatedly. Some people disagree, but if we're not seeing any signs that there's an investigation around Jan 6, there probably is no investigation around Jan 6. I mean, I hear everybody that says, well, there must be, but we're not seeing any of it. Like there's nothing.
There is evidence, excuse me, there is evidence that there's an investigation at DOJ because we did see the indictment of Stuart Rhodes. So that does provide us with some evidence.
But not of Donald Trump. I'm saying there's definitely an investigation.
That's important.
But not to Donald Trump. I'm saying Donald Trump specifically. I think everyone else, fair game.
Investigation, but that investigation will lead us to Donald Trump. I think if we continue to follow where the planners are going, that will lead us into the inner circle. The fact that, if we look at it, think of the January 6th committee as the civil portion. And if we say the DOJ is the criminal portion, just like at the New York Attorney General's office, just like they said, we've got civil and criminal running parallel. So I can't imagine that Merrick Garland is not doing anything.
100% agree with you that that's what the intention is, to investigate the whole thing. I just don't think because he really is a confidential informant of the FBI, and because we have that system, they are not in a position to really go after him. And I don't know whether he helped them as president. Maybe he helped them while he was president. Who knows? He probably has immunity on a federal level, or there would be a greater indication that the people around him are being investigated by the DOJ, but we're not seeing that. And the DOJ is stopping at Stewart Rhodes. It hasn't, it's probably, maybe it'll get to Flynn, maybe it'll get to Roger Stone. I just don't see it all the way up to even Kimberly Foyle. Who knows? Maybe that's a possibility, but I don't see it going all the way to the Trump family, and that's why I think there is so much pressure, and not even pressure. That's maybe why there is such a setup for Letitia James in New York to do what she's doing. I mean, I think she's the one who's going to go after Donald Trump because she can, because she's in the state. So I don't disagree with you, Joe. Of course, it's clear. Well, we've spent many hours in the show investigating. It's pretty obvious that Donald Trump, orchestrated this the Jan 6 attempted coup, and he did it for months ahead of time, and we all know that, and he did it with his incredibly large group of crazy people that he wanders around with. That's pretty obvious. But will he get indicted for that at the DOJ? I don't think we know. My bet is that he won't, but who knows? I'll be open to be wrong on that. Should we look at some other things that he did? Let's see what other overestimates Mr. Trump is said to have done, because it's kind of fun. Here is the Trump golf course in Aberdeen, Scotland, which he bought in was it 2006? Is that what it says there? 12.6 million. What a good deal he got for that. And somehow he assumed that they were going to be able to build 2,500 luxury homes there. Of course, it's not actually zoned for 2,500 luxury homes. It's only approved for 1,500 apartments, small apartments. But so he estimated that the value would be worth in 2011, 161 million, and in 2014, 435 million. The 161
Wow.
million, I think, came from Forbes magazine, which wasn't even a real evaluation of the property. In 2014, he based it on the building of these luxury homes, which he cannot build. So another lie in terms of what he's worth. He's basically broke by all accounts. I mean, if you look at this other thing that they say here, that he's got 7 Trump branded golf courses between 2013 and 2014. He estimated a 30% premium on those assets because he said they used his brand. And then between 2015 and 2020, it was just a 15% premium. But he's basically just marking up the value of his properties just because they aren't called Trump. Maybe some value there, but I don't know. And then there's this, the Trump Park Avenue, which he says is worth 311 million in 2011. It is worth potentially 311 million, but 293 million of that is unsold apartments, which he owns in that building. So it's not actually worth 300 million. If he sells those, it's worth 300 million. And he landed up downgrading some of the value there. But it's interesting that even Ivanka has an $8.5 million to buy option to buy her apartment, which she rents in the Trump Park Avenue. And on paper, that's valued at $25 million. So even she is aware of this little scheme that he's running, and she's part of the scheme, which I'm sure the Attorney General must know and think about a lot. Finally, 40 Wall Street, bought for 601 million, in 2010. This is interesting because Mr. Trump, listen to this, under Mr. Weisselberg's leadership, began working with his son, Jack Weisselberg, who was director at Ladder Capital, to refinance the $160 million mortgage on this property. So now working for Ladder Capital, the same Cushman and Wakefield team that performed the initial 2010-2012 appraisals value the building at $550 million, which is a lot more than the original, I think it was $250 million it was initially appraised for. While OAG has obtained evidence that the 2010 appraisal did not reflect a good faith assessment of value, using demonstrably incorrect facts and aggressive assumptions. Basically, this is, I think, super significant because it means that they may have Weisselberg's son actually maybe caught up in all of this, and maybe that's why Weisselberg is singing a little bit more about what's going on, because it seems he might be implicated in that little scheme. At the end of the day, 40 Wall Street is now estimated by the Trump organization at $700 million, which is far, far more than it's worth. Kimberly, that is a whole lot of criming going on. It feels to me like a whole lot of
Yes, it
criming.
is. It certainly is. But, I kind of want to go back to the idea about Trump being an informant, which he very well could be. And I'm not going to say that he is or isn't, but that's a rumor that we've heard. I've never heard that verified in any way, whether it was who had a source or not. Regardless, and I don't know what's going to happen with Donald Trump in 1/6. I would say the safest bet is that he's probably not going to be indicted for that particular event, just because of who he is and the history of our country and the history of who has, gotten in trouble for certain crimes that they've done. But I do think that and this is a guess, and I'm not a fangirl of Garland.
Yeah.
But I think that there is an argument to be made that he's listening. They're doing everything they can, and that point about Joe made about the 1/6 committee being like the civil side.
Yeah.
I think they're getting all the information that they can get, and they're going to turn it over. They're going to make their criminal referrals. And it was like a friend of mine was asking me, like, why isn't anything happening to Trump right now? And she doesn't understand any of it. No, she doesn't follow politics.
Yeah.
So I was trying to tell her, that look, in order to take this, obviously they would have to have a grand jury, and then they'd have to have an indictment because they'd have to feel like it would be 100%. But I think that when it comes to a former president, no matter who it is, they have to be so very careful. And I'm not talking about any kind of violent retaliation from the other side. If they screw this up, it will be so monumentally bad for everybody. And so, frankly, as much as I want to see him indicted for 1/6, I feel like unless that is 100% conviction, 150%, it's not worth doing it.
No.
It has to be perfect. To your point, it absolutely has to be perfect. We're talking about one of the largest crimes here, a former president, potentially, and I thought it might be worth asking like a Glenn Kirshner or somebody like that about RICO, because RICO is, those are huge. Those are enormous things. And those take time to develop. They take time to assess, and then you have to kind of look and say, do we have the goods on the boss, right? Do we have enough to get to the boss in all of this? And like you said, it has to go so 100%, because if you look at what happened, what they did to turn around the 2016 investigations, they turned that into a coup. They were able to take that information and gaslight us into all thinking, well, wait a second, there's nothing there. Mueller said there was not, Barr said there was nothing there. So there was nothing there. Well, wait a second, there was a lot there. And I think if you miss, right, if you go after the president and miss, then like you said, they're going to take that and say, do you see what the Democrats try to do? They will take this witch hunt to the next level.
You're 100% correct.
That we can't do.
And look, I don't think it's a good idea to go after presidents for political crimes anyhow, generally speaking. I mean, he was very guilty, and we should definitely prosecute if there's 100% proof of that. But it's difficult, right? It's politics. It gets complicated. One side starts doing it, the other side does it. It's a nightmare. But on these other crimes where he's clearly swindled the government for millions and millions of dollars, and his family is just a corrupt entity. They're basically just a mob family laundering money for the Russians and whomever, and then also lying about their value. I mean, their assets. It's that absolutely fair game. Go after him as much as possible. We should have known this information. Had he disclosed his information correctly and accurately beforehand, we would have known this, and he would never have been president. But certainly that he kept it secret, and now we're finding it out. Absolutely, go for it. And, it goes down to his whole family. Absolutely.
To your point about political prosecutions, right? I mean, you look, and he was impeached twice, right? So the House impeached him twice. And to Kimberly, your earlier point about, the Republicans had their chances to get rid of him for good. They could have convicted him on either one of those impeachments.
True.
So they had their opportunity to get rid of him for good, and they didn't.
That's true.
But what's very interesting is in Georgia, what Fannie Willis has is a very interesting case, because election fraud is a crime, but it's also political. He was politically trying to retain power, but committing a crime in attempting to do so. So now you have this convergence of, is it really political or is it a crime? So if there are election fraud laws that are on the books in Georgia, then he has to be prosecuted for those, because he can't be impeached for them. He's not the president.
Yeah, I think Florida
Right.
may be a different case. I think it might be a clearer case. I think the problem with Jan 6 is it's going to come down to what he said, and what he said, and it's going to land up being very, very
Yeah.
confounding and confusing unless there's actual tapes. And even then, we know how he speaks in unclear phrases. I do think people
That's
like
the
Mark,
whole point. Yeah,
yeah,
like Michael Cohen was talking about, he
yeah,
talks in code. It'd be a shame if something happened to your wife, if X happened. And so I think he's very careful to avoid being so obvious. We all know what happened, but
yeah,
taking that, and that's what I told my friend, taking that to a court of law and successfully presenting that, because there's one thing to see it happen and understand what's going on, but in a court of law, there's certain loopholes and rules. I mean, we saw it with Cosby. So it's like somebody can be as guilty AF and still walk away.
yeah.
And again, that cannot happen.
And he's savvy
And
enough
that'll
to
be
hide
next.
himself. I mean, he just is. And you could basically, they don't have very much, as far as I can tell. There's not that much more other than a few phone calls, but who knows? Maybe they've got the transcripts of those phone calls.
Maybe, yeah.
I will say that Mark Meadows, I don't know. Mark Meadows looks to me like a very vulnerable guy right now, because he seems to be in the middle of all of this, in a way that Trump is actually not. I mean, Trump's at one stage removed, but we saw yesterday with the Epstein subpoena letter, and that's interesting. And Joe, you pointed out that he's on the list there as being responsible for media relations.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, those kinds of people, when you've got a committee like that set up and a war room and Meadows organizing and orchestrating all of this, he looks like he's in a little bit of trouble. Certainly Michael Flynn is in a lot of trouble. If he doesn't get arrested, then we have a problem. And
I want to read this real quick. Alison Gill of Mueller wrote just a few minutes ago. Just occurred to me, the SCOTUS ruling may remove any last shred of doubt about privilege claims and could clear the way for DOJ to indict Meadows, since he, as chief of staff, would have stronger privilege claim than Bannon did. So that was her take. I thought it was
it is really interesting, and I'm wondering if this is what they've been waiting for. If the grand jury has not moved forward on the ruling around his, contempt of Congress charge, because maybe they've been waiting to see what SCOTUS is going to rule. Now that SCOTUS has ruled this, it's kind of, he really is in contempt. He really is in contempt if he doesn't show up now. He's got a SCOTUS ruling that says you've got to do it. If he doesn't show up, and he is guilty AF, as you point out, that is not a good time to be Mark Meadows. So good point to Alison Gill on the from Mueller, she wrote. We have a few more minutes left here. Joe, go ahead.
That is so. Mueller, she wrote, put out a thread today on the New York AG information, and it's required reading. Absolutely required reading. I think she did it in 3 parts, and it just goes through every little bit of everything we all need to know. It's everything that we need to be aware of. It's required reading.
What is she? What's the up? So if I'm not going to read it right now, what's the take on it? What that she has? Or is it too much to summarize?
Okay. Yeah, it's too much to summarize, because, like I said, she had to do it sort of in 3 different parts because it's that long. I think it was a 115-page document. So there's just so much meat on the bone that's in there, which is ridiculous that they're not talking about it. To your point earlier, Walter Cronkite is not walking through that door. Okay, we're not in a situation where the news is reporting the news. The news is being done by the public. The news is being done on Twitter. The news is being done by people who want to see this country remain a democracy. So following, people like Mueller, she wrote, and understanding and seeing it how it's laid out in such simplistic, real talk language that everybody can understand. It just helps to bring people to where we need to be from a decision-making perspective.
Well said. You spoke to Jamie Harrison the other day, didn't you, Kimberly?
Did.
Tell me about that conversation. How did it go?
It went well. I think, some people thought maybe he was being a little bit too, but I think my main point that I wanted to get across, and this all from a conversation, actually I tagged him, I think it was November, and I was terrified, and I was like, Democrats have to be stronger. We're dealing with fascists and white supremacists. And he came on and he replied, I don't know what's going on.
It's okay. Go ahead. We can hear you.
Uh-oh.
We can hear you. You can go ahead.
No.
We can hear you. I want to hear the end of it. Are you there? Can you hear us, Kimberly? Are you there, Kimberly? Uh-oh. Okay, I guess Kimberly will rejoin us if she can. Sorry to see her go. She had us on a cliffhanger there for sure. I was really keen to find out what she was going to say there. Oh well, Kimberly, come back if you can. We'd really want to talk to you, and hopefully hear the end of that. Jamie Harrison was good to come on her show, which is the Start Me Up podcast. And you can get it to hear that on her Patreon, which I think is Start Me Up Pod, if I'm not mistaken. Joe, you've had a really great few days. The other day, I'm very effusive about you on Twitter because I'm always so blown away by how good you are and how detailed you are about so much of these incredible threads that you have. And the other day, you came up with a good thread that really proved that these two conspiracies, the one where we have fake state representatives or electors, being put forward, how that sort of mirrors the stuff we're finding in January the 6th. Tell us a little bit about that.
You mentioned earlier Mike Flynn, and he's, I think, one of the most dangerous people to our democracy at this point right now. And the people that are around him, Sidney Powell, right? Jesse Banal, who was part of his legal team when he was going through all he was going through after lying and then pleading guilty for lying twice to the FBI. What happened was, we saw that there was these 7 false electors, in 7 states. And I started to wonder, like, okay, who are these people and what is their background? Obviously thinking that, they're high up Republican operatives or, people who are engaged in Republican politics, which, was exactly what I expected to find. But then I started to look at the lawsuits that were brought by Sidney Powell in those same states. And what I saw was that 27 of the false electors actually were plaintiffs in the Kraken lawsuits.
Unbelievable. So it places the same people that Sidney Powell was using as her plaintiffs. It makes her connected to all those false slate of electors.
Absolutely.
Unbelievable.
And what's even worse is there's again, there's there's not just this the Kraken lawsuits, but there was defamation that was occurring on the part of Dominion voting systems. And not only that, but employees of Dominion voting systems. So there's a whole case that's going on right now. Rudy Giuliani was deposed in it. Sidney Powell was deposed in the case. Michelle Malkin from Fox News and Newsmax. Chanel Orion from OAN, she was deposed in this case. All of these people. Oh, absolutely.
So that's a whole bunch of well-known people.
It's a whole lot of well-known people. And when you see what they're saying in these depositions, it really tells the story of everything. It's really like a parallel track of exactly what was going on during the Sidney Powell Kraken cases. They were looking for affidavits. They were looking for the data, right? So there was a portion of Mike Flynn's team that was looking for information, looking at the voting data, and they were looking to tell a story. And what ends up happening is they get this story about this guy from Dominion Voting Systems who was on a quote unquote Antifa call prior, in September. And they said on that call, don't worry, Trump's not going to win. I made sure of that. And they were an employee of Dominion. Now, whether or not that's true is still yet to be determined. This is what's happening. But right now, there's a case about the person who was on that call. His name is Eric Coomer. And that person is suing Donald Trump and Rudy Giuliani and Sidney Powell and all these others for defamation because of the lies that were told about the election itself, saying that it was really him that was the main culprit as to why these voting machines and why everything was wrong.
So they're suing him?
He's suing them.
She's suing them. That makes sense. Yeah,
correct, for defamation.
That's where the $1 billion lawsuits come in, right? And that's where Fox News could also be in real trouble as well.
Right. Well, I will say that they will be in real trouble if what's going on in these depositions are accurate, because
it
looks as though information was sent. Go ahead.
No, please go ahead.
Oh, okay. In this, it looks like information was solicited by Sidney Powell. Sidney Powell says, "I want to get there's a specific affidavit that she was interested in getting, and it was based on who was on that phone call." And they want that information. That information then became, that affidavit became the cornerstone of these Kraken lawsuits.
Mm-hmm.
So the big lie is predicated on what potentially could be a little lie as to whether or not this call even, had this person on it, and whether or not that person, had anything to do with the voting machines.
Wow, that's going to be really interesting. Look, I think that it's high time that the Fox News ecosystem, the Newsmax ecosystem, even Facebook, there are too many instruments of propaganda and disinformation in America that are changing the American landscape for the worse and certainly poisoning our political system. These have to be removed. I mean, there's no other way to get at them. They just have to be removed. Fox News is not going to get any better. It's still going to spew lies. And if they do, we'll be in many more lawsuits, but they can probably afford to pay them. We really need to move towards a more truthful news environment. And it doesn't have to be, policed in that way. It doesn't have to be, but we can't have foreign propaganda outlets like OAN and Newsmax and basically Fox News, which is foreign propaganda, or even Facebook. Who knows who really owns and runs Facebook? Because it gets more interesting every day when we're investigated. Yeah. It's absolutely important we reform our information channels and get those things sorted out. I think Kimberley might be back just on the on her. Oh, there she is. I can see your room. You're on the wrong camera, but it's nice to see you. You flip the camera around, we'll see you properly. Can you try your other camera, Kimberley? Because I see your front end camera, not your back end. Well, I really want to hear the end of the story. That's the thing.
And Zed, I just want to apologize. I don't want to, sort of go on this tangent sort of at the end of the show here without a lot of information. So I will tweet what I put together in a thread about that entire ordeal.
Oh, great. Put it right underneath this feed. It'll be great for everyone to read. Let me try one more time with Kimberley. And if we don't, we don't. But let's try, because are you there, Kimberley? Are you there? Hello? I don't hear you. You can hear us. I don't think I can. You're on the air, but I can't hear you. So, hello. We are going to have Kimberley back another time to figure out exactly what she said to Jamie Harrison, or Jamie Harrison said to her. Or better still, you can go right now to her podcast, which is amazing, and I really recommend it. It's called the Start Me Up podcast. And she interviews Jamie Harrison on her most recent podcast. I'll put that in the replies below this feed as well. And it's DNC chairman Jamie Harrison talking about the need to be hopeful while at the same time taking a cue from the right and using fear as a motivator. Fear is a good motivator. I agree. Should we try Kimberley one more time? I don't think I can hear you, Kimberley, because I can't see any bars going when you're talking. I can try one more time because, as someone just pointed out, it's artisanal broadcasting. It is that. Are you there, Kimberley? Hello? No luck. Oh, I can hear you. I think you're there. Hello, Kimberley. Can you hear us? No. Well, there you go. That's the show for tonight. It's been a fun rock and roll show. You can always follow Kimberley Johnson at Author Kimberley. That's at Author Kimberley. And you can follow Joe Dempsey at Dempsey2. I got it right this time. Now, people should be watching for the next hour, because at 8 o'clock, wherever your TVs are, they should be looking at the Senate, because who knows if there'll be a surprise there as they vote to perhaps change the rules to allow for a talking filibuster. And the talking filibuster might allow for voters' rights bills to be finally passed if they can get through the talking filibuster. Kimberley, I can tell right now, if you say something. Count to 3 or 4 or 5 for me. I don't have feed from you. I don't have audio from you. I have everything but audio, which is, I can show you, but no audio. No audio. Although, wait, I can hear you. Kimberley, can you hear us? Artisanal broadcasting. I love the term. Kimberley, one last chance. Are you there? No, she's gone. Okay. That is the show for tonight. Thank you for being here on Narrative. We will be back Friday night with the after show with Greg Oliar will be back. That'll be nice to see him. And who else is going to be here? Rachel Bitterkaufer is going to be here as well. So that'll be fun. Friday on the after show. We'll see you then. Joe, thank you for being here tonight. Thank you to Kimberley Johnson for being here tonight. It's been a rock and roll show. No, certainly couldn't believe how look at this. I think she's actually back. Ha. The extended version of the show. We're going longer just for you. I mean,
I was so frustrating.
I know, for us too, because we really want to hear what Jamie Harrison said to you.
Okay, well, basically, hopefully, I don't know what's going on with my connection, but I'll be real brief. The thing I wanted to be very clear is that in 2008, I was following politics, but I wasn't a junkie. And what made me a political junkie was not Barack and the way that he could give a speech. He was such a wonderful orator. He was great, and he had my vote. But the thing that made me a political junkie was Sarah, and it's because she scared me, and she woke me up to, oh my God, I've got to pay closer attention to this. Mm-hmm. And so I hear a little bit about what you guys were saying, and hopefully my screen is freezing, so I don't know if I'm coming through or not.
We can hear you.
But James, utilizing like fear as a motivator. So yes, we have to inspire. We have to make Democrats feel emotional. But telling us what we're going to give us or what they have given us, while extremely important, is not going to send us to the polls. Like, if we remind you, you're going to lose your Medicare, you're going to lose your Social Security, you're going to lose a right to a free abortion, you're going to lose your right to reproductive freedom. Make sure people understand what they're going to lose.
Absolutely. Just think about Trump 2.0
or my Wi-Fi.
DeSantis or whatever. Is that going to continue?
Going on?
Oh, my Wi-Fi is going to be my new curse. So yeah, but I mean, think about what would Trump administration, another Trump administration would look like. We can hear you, but I think you can't hear us as effectively as we can hear you. Can you hear us? Yeah, we got all that. We got all that, Kimberly, which is good. I'm now going to really say goodbye because this is moving from artisanal to kind of just satirical. But I'm going to play the outro here. I'm going to say goodnight to everybody. Thank you, Kimberley Johnson at Author Kimberly, and also her podcast, the Start Me Up podcast. And Joe Dempsey from Twitter at Dempsey2 is where you can follow him, and we'll post all the relevant stuff just below this feed on Twitter. Thank you very much for being here tonight. We'll see you again on Friday for the after show. Have a good night, everybody. Narrative is made possible by viewers like you. Join today and support truly independent journalism at patreon.com/narrative. That's patreon.com/narrative.